On this episode of China Uncensored, the Chinese military has landed this bomber plane in the South China Sea, and China's neighbors are not happy. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. The South China Sea. More than $5 trillion worth of trade flows through here each year. And underneath, there's an estimated 11 billion barrels of oil to tap. No wonder it's a powder keg, or oil barrel, of competing territorial claims. But not to worry, because the People's Liberation Army Air Force has just landed one of its state-of-the-art nuclear-capable long-range bombers on a disputed island deep in the South China Sea. China's Ministry of Defense said they were practicing simulated air attacks, because practice makes perfect. And with the move, Beijing's annexation of the South China Sea appears complete without firing a single shot. At least according to news.com.au, which is owned by News Corp. They also say the move is a clear signal that Beijing considers its ownership of the contested waterways and illegally reclaimed islands complete and uncontested. Although I have to say, uncontested? A lot of countries are still contesting the Chinese regime's claims, just not very effectively. Anyway, last Friday, the Chinese Air Force released this video of its newest heavy bomber landing and taking off from Woody Island. Woody Island is one of the natural islands that make up the Paracel Island chain. It's also contested. Both Taiwan and Vietnam lay claim to it, but clearly, it's occupied and militarized by the People's Republic of China. Openly turning Woody into a military outpost for long-range bombers is an important step in the Chinese Communist Party's takeover of the South China Sea. See this 9-dash line? The Communist Party says everything inside it belongs to them. An international arbitration court disagrees, but the Communist Party can just ignore a court decision it doesn't like. They've built artificial islands on coral reefs and tidal rocky outcrops, then turned these islands into weaponized fortresses. It's just like playing Fortnite. Well, minus the monsters. Wait a second. I know what's going on. The whole reason the Communist Party is militarizing the South China Sea is to stop giant monsters from invading China. It makes sense. As we know from this historical documentary, giant monsters once tried to invade China from across the Great Wall during the Song Dynasty. True story. But while giant monsters may be a serious threat, Xi Jinping had actually promised in 2015 that China would not militarize these islands. But you can't see his hands, his fingers are definitely crossed. Now, 3 years later, the only thing missing from the Chinese military's total domination of the South China Sea, in the words of U.S. Admiral Philip Davidson, is deployed forces. But that may be approaching soon. The Chinese military deployed their first missiles a few weeks ago in the South China Sea. And now, these warplanes on Woody Island change everything. I guess Missiles for Peace was so successful, they decided to start Bombers for Peace too. Don't worry, I'm sure they're just defensive bombers. But with facilities that can handle bomber planes, the Chinese military is now capable of challenging any of its neighbors in the region. And any forces deployed to the islands would easily overwhelm the military forces of any other South China Sea claimants. And the capability to launch long-range military operations from Woody Island means China's military reach extends way beyond the 9-dash line. How far? China's less advanced combat bombers can reach all 5 Philippine military bases where the U.S. military has troops and facilities. And China's new top-of-the-line H-6K bomber that just landed on Woody Island has a range of more than 2,000 miles. So the Chinese military now has most of Southeast Asia within combat flight range. Defensive combat flight range, obviously. And that's just the beginning, according to the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative. They say the military base on Woody Island is a blueprint for other land formations further south. In particular, the islands China built on top of 3 contested reefs: the Subi Reef, Mischief Reef, and the Fiery Cross Reefs, part of the Spratly Islands archipelago. Satellite images of the reefs already show airfields and hangars that can accommodate bombers like the H-6 series. And from there, China's combat planes could potentially reach northern Australia and the U.S. island of Guam. That's why the White House has some thoughts about this.
We're well aware of China's militarization of the South China Sea. We've raised concerns directly with the Chinese about this, and there will be near-term and long-term consequences.
But the Chinese don't fear they are provoking a crisis, says Bonnie Glaser, director of the China Power Project at Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, because the U.S. has already lost its capability to shape events in the South China Sea. Since obviously we don't want to have a full-on war with China, right? There's just one hope, says Admiral Davidson: recovering a technological advantage. Hypersonic and directed energy weapons, resilient space, cyber, and network capabilities, he says, will be crucial to our ability to fight and win. So if there's a war, it will be fought with hypersonic and energy weapons. Welcome to our dystopian future. And until then, the Chinese military will probably continue to build up its own capacity. And on that happy note, it's time for a question from one of our fans who supports China Uncensored through our website on Patreon. Jonathan Swanberg asks, how afraid should you/we be that China is focusing on creating AI without the necessary oversight? Like, are we talking Terminator level scared? Oh, Jonathan, we should be Terminator 2 level scared. Because China doesn't approach science in the way most countries around the world do. Take the United States, for example. The public has a say. There's debate online and in the media. That means moral considerations are taken into account. The Communist Party doesn't work that way. It doesn't have to answer to anyone. And what it does for the sake of short-term control could have long-term consequences. Elon Musk has made the point that any evil dictator will eventually die. But AI could create an immortal dictator. So, in the Communist Party's rush to create AI, we may all end up as slaves to the machines. And really, would that be so bad? Remember, you can leave your questions for me too. Support China Uncensored with $1 or more per episode and join our exclusive 50-cent army. And what do you think about the Chinese military's expansion in the South China Sea and its increasing global reach? Leave your comments below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time. Thanks for watching. China Uncensored is supported mainly through contributions from viewers like you. Without our viewer support, we'd have to stop the show. So, click this orange button and visit patreon.com/China Uncensored. You can contribute $1 or more per episode. You can also set a monthly limit if you need. When you join, we'll give you some cool perks and you'll be making a big difference for us.